Protect your privacy online with the best VPN for gaming, ExpressVPN, and visit expressvpn.com/ghilliemaster, linked in the description, to find out how you can get 3 months free. Hey everyone, and welcome to my framerate performance analysis for GTA 5 and GTA Online on the next-gen systems, more specifically the Xbox Series X console. However, the PS5 performs quite similar in comparison to the Series X. And if you're curious on the Xbox Series S, while I can't test that myself because I don't own one, it performs a tad bit worse than what you're about to see from the test here on the Series X, so just keep that in mind as we go through the video. So overall, the game performs pretty well for the most part, and I want to start out with things that caused the Xbox One to drop in performance back in the day. And so the first test here is just driving around in a private session. Back when I did the FPS comparison video on the Xbox One a couple years back, even in a session by yourself just driving around, the game would have drops in performance all the way to the mid to low 20s. I'm happy to say the game runs much better than that, as it should, being a whole console generation ahead of the Xbox One. So driving around in a solo lobby, you shouldn't have any issues with performance in any of the different modes, aside from maybe an occasional dip to like 59 or 58, which is not noticeable at all in gameplay. And Fidelity mode sticks to its 30 FPS just fine as well, which is great. Aside from driving though, another very important part to Grand Theft Auto is shooting and high action scenarios where you're getting shot at by lots of enemies with a lot of clutter going on in the world with vehicles. And in order to test this, I used the director mode and turn on invincibility so that I could basically have a massive shootout without worrying about dying. And again, in this situation, all 3 modes handle it very well, so you won't have to deal with frame drops messing with your aim or input latency in general in gunfights. Where performance starts to struggle though is when you introduce tons of visual effects like the new explosion and fire effects, for example. A single explosion happening on screen won't cause any noticeable performance issues, as you can see by the Zentorno being blown up in the footage. It's when you really stress the game with tons of explosions happening where you start to really feel those drops. And the best way to showcase that is with a good old tank rampage. To clarify, this is in director mode, not in GTA Online. We'll of course be talking about how that affects performance later in the video, but for the time being, I just want to show how the game performs by yourself. And on this tank rampage, the performance RT mode in particular has the most frequent dips in performance, sometimes dropping into the 40s for a few seconds, and you will absolutely feel that drop in the smoothness of the game. The performance mode experiences less frame drops than performance RT, but it's still not a smooth 60 FPS 100% of the time. Meanwhile, the Fidelity mode seems to be locked to 30 FPS for about 95% of the footage here, with 1 or 2 dips to the mid-20s. The good news about this though is that I had to intentionally put stress on the game and really try to drop the FPS by doing things that you will most likely not be doing every time you play this game. Now we get into the GTA Online framerate tests. GTA Online has been known to perform noticeably worse on every single platform it's been on. On PC, your performance in full public lobbies is not what you get in single player or solo lobbies, it's a tad bit worse. On last gen, on the Xbox One, the performance was horrible in populated public lobbies. Playing the game on next gen though, through backwards compatibility, it helps smooth out that performance loss, but it still played at 30 FPS in the end. So how do the next gen consoles handle populated lobbies on next gen GTA Online? Well, the tests you're about to see were all performed in a populated lobby of over 24 or so players, and there was a lot of action going on as well, with jet suppressors and players killing each other. And the first thing I wanted to see was if there was any change in performance when you were just driving around in a public lobby, not even doing anything demanding. Just how does the presence of other players affect the performance? And the answer is it really doesn't affect it in the grand scheme of things, with a couple of exceptions. The first one is being around groups of other players seems to occasionally drop performance, but it probably largely has to do with the amount of cops nearby and how much action is taking place around those players at the same time. Those small dips only seem to happen on the performance modes though. Fidelity mode driving around seems to keep that 30 FPS. The other area that seems to drop performance consistently is the Diamond Casino parking lot. In my private session test, this area didn't drop performance noticeably at all, but in a busy public lobby, going near this area will drop performance on the 60 FPS modes. It caused drops to the 50s consistently just by being around here. The Fidelity mode, however, didn't drop, at least in this test. To really stress the system to its max, though, I took my tank in a populated lobby over to the casino and started causing mayhem, and the game reacted as about you would expect. This is where you see the most significant and most consistent performance dips. In every other test, the dips in FPS will only last like a few seconds or so. This, as you can see, causes the game to consistently run in the 40 FPS range, and it's really not that much better whether you're on performance RT or performance. They both struggle in this specific area. And even on Fidelity mode, which has seen the most consistent performance thus far with the least amount of drops, that even struggles to run this at the intended 30 FPS cap. This likely has to do with the sheer amount of parked cars in this area. That's at least my guess, because there are a lot that do spawn here. But even doing all this, the performance is still miles better than what you had on the last gen consoles. Because just using a tank on last gen, on the Xbox One at least, the game would drop into the 17-ish FPS range, which is just awful. That is unplayable. And I wouldn't go as far as to call this lack of optimization either, because it's kind of difficult to optimize for someone intentionally trying to do everything they can to drop performance. In regular gameplay, you're not going to see the game run this bad. However, one area where I do think you could probably blame optimization is Cayo Perico. Cayo Perico has been known to cause performance drops on PC as well, and the new consoles also struggle in some areas here. On top of the tower here, as I turn the camera to look out towards the map, it does drop into the 40s on the performance RT mode, and it does kind of stay that way until I turn the camera away to the other area. It is mostly on the performance RT mode though. Regular performance and Fidelity don't struggle as much here. So to wrap this video up, this is by far the best performance you're going to get out of GTA 5 on console. Even in its worst moments, it still performs better than last gen consoles ever did. Unless you go out of your way to stress the engine, you should have a very smooth experience playing on next gen. And if you want the smoothest possible experience, the non-ray tracing performance mode is the way to go for sure. But really, either one will give you a good experience, whether you're going performance RT or performance, or if you just want that cinematic experience and you want the game to look as best as possible, you can go with 30 FPS in Fidelity mode. If you guys enjoyed this video or found it helpful, feel free to leave a like, as well as subscribe to my channel for more GTA Online content. I want to give a huge shout out to all my channel members for your support. If you'd like to become a member for some exclusive perks, you can either use the join button or the link that's down in the description. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.